Good morning. Just a short video from my Tesla Model 3. This is the Standard Range Plus, the cheap and cheerful model. I thought I'd do this on in reference to range and the reality of range, really. Now, 2 days ago, I charged this car up to 200 miles. So there's an indicator. It's got 119 miles left now, so it's about half the battery left. So I charged it 200 miles, but that's about 90%. And that the mileage there, the total mileage was 1,460 miles. So since that charge, I've done 50 miles. And now it reads 119 miles left on the battery. So obviously there's a bit of a difference because that's 71 miles and I've used 71 miles and I've only driven 50 miles. Now the reason for this is you don't drive that distance in one go. You stop and start driving. Normal driving, really. But what happens is that on these road tests you see on YouTube or whatever, people get in the car and say, right, I'm going to drive 200 miles and see what the range is like. Well, that's not very realistic, is it? Because in real life, you do short journeys. So as I say, I charged this car on Wednesday this week. It's now Friday. So on Wednesday night, I charged it to 200 miles. In the morning, it had 195 miles left. The reason it lost 5 miles just parked is because the car was, well, it's not a very cold night, about 6 degrees centigrade. But when it's at 200 miles, the battery's warm because it's just been charged. So the battery cools off, so it's down to 195 miles. So that's 5 miles lost. Then I went with my wife for a meal, and that's about 35 miles there and back. So it's a reasonable run. And I did a little trip on that day as well, a little short trip. And the next day I did another short trip to take my mobile phone back to the makers, because it was after just 6 weeks it went wrong, and it's going to take 2 weeks to get it back. So it's a bit rubbish, but anyway, that's by the by. So all in all, and now it's Friday, so it's the third day. And so I thought I'd drive till I got a nice round figure. So I started with 1,460, now I've got 1,510, so I've done 50 miles, and I have consumed, what have I consumed? 81 miles. Yeah, that's right. So where has it gone? I'll say 5 miles went off overnight, just being parked. And it's short journeys. When you start on your journey, the car uses loads of energy. Some to heat the car. Battery doesn't like being cold particularly. So in real terms, stop and start driving uses a lot more power. So the projected range, if you're a stop-start driver, which is a bit like normal driving, is a lot lower, as you can see, because all I've done is, well, it's all on the screen. I've done 50 miles and I've lost 81 miles. So that's a little bit disappointing. But I'll change them. And I haven't been, you can see by this, what's it there, I haven't been driving like a lunatic, as you can see. In fact, I've been very careful and very slow because I thought I'd save a bit. But that's the real figures. And there's another real figure down here, and this is the figure for all the time I've had the car. So since I've had the car, only since October, I didn't do a lot of miles. I've done 1,510 miles, and I've consumed that many kilowatts, and the average is 297 watts per mile. Now, realistically, if you've got the same car as this in the UK, this is winter, so it uses a bit more, but it's been fairly mild. It's not been frost scraping weather. So realistically, those are the figures over the whole period you are looking at. So that's what, 300 the sum. A little bit, it's better than 3 miles per kilowatt, which means your range realistically is more like 180 miles. And I know this car is, it said it would do 250 miles. That's everything being perfect. And it's all just in one run. People just don't drive in one run. I mean, I suppose that's how range sounds, is that you're going to drive 250 miles straight off. You don't do that. So over three days, as I say, there's the figures I've got. And over the time I've had the car since October, I'd say out of a Tesla Model 3 in the UK, driving not like a lunatic, driving normally, you're going to get that much per kilowatt. So the range is realistically more like 180 miles. Don't really, in real terms, expect more than 180 miles out of your Tesla Model 3 in real terms in the UK. Now, I'm not slagging off Tesla, because this car is absolutely fantastic. Absolutely wonderful. But the figures you get for distance and for mileage and for range aren't real. They're just not real. But to balance things up a bit, in a fossil car, a diesel car or a petrol car, their figures aren't real either, because you start up a petrol car and it uses shed loads of power. You start up a diesel car and it uses shed loads of power, and it's not till it warms up that the miles per gallon get better. In fact, I think probably a diesel and a petrol car is probably worse than an electric car as far as this is concerned. So, but you don't notice it so much, because petrol and diesel cars waste so much fuel anyway. It all goes by the by. But electric cars, you tend to be looking at range, probably because the syndrome of you've got to charge it and charging stations. So range weighs on your mind, so you notice it more, because you can just pop down a petrol station and fill up anywhere. But charging at home is much more a pleasant issue, though, because you just plug it in, clean, dry, never closed, always cheap. Much nicer thing to do. But maybe range gets in your head a bit. So at least when you're using your electric car and it's using lots of power because you're taking John or Jenny to school, at least you're not pumping poison out the exhaust pipe, because cars that take John and take the children to school are probably on a short journey, and they are really checking out the fumes. Because even a normal car, I mean, I actually borrowed, because this went in for service, I borrowed an Audi A6 diesel, and the figures on the screen for that, starting on a cold morning, the miles per gallon were as low as 10 miles to the gallon until the thing warmed up, using massive amount of fuel, much more than an electric car uses, even in the same cold conditions. It's more apparent on electric cars. Now, by the by, and this is a bit of an odd one, electric cars don't like cold batteries, and Nissan Leafs use very little cooling. In fact, they're being condemned for it, because they're not really looking after the battery. So they get sort of charging gate and things like that, because the battery's hot and it won't charge quick when the battery's hot, and everyone slags it off, including me, because it's odd to have a vehicle which doesn't look after its own equipment. So I think it's a bit crazy. But now I've had a bit of a thought. Now, Tesla's batteries are very, very, very well cooled, and Britain is not very, very hot country. I'm beginning to wonder if I'll show you. Actually, while I'm talking, I'll show you this, because it seems a bit wild to me. There's birds. That's odd, isn't it? Anyway, I'm beginning to wonder that Nissan Leafs, through sheer fluke, because I know they just do it to be cheap, just not have the battery control, temperature control, in this country, perhaps the Nissan Leaf could be more fuel efficient on short journeys. Because like air-cooled fossil cars, they are very efficient actually, because there's no water jacket to warm up. They are very good on short journeys. And I'm beginning to wonder if the Nissan Leaf is quite good at popping to the shops and back and doing local journeys. Perhaps accidentally they've hit upon something good, that because the battery isn't cooled as well, it doesn't take so long to warm up. Maybe there's something in it, but this is just a thought. Anyway, I'm going now because I've bored you long enough, and I'll see you later.